For Amazon Day 1 Hardcore, most people are going to play full summons. It's also typically the strongest choice for playing through the game. The only difference might be that you opted to put points into Power Strike for normal difficulty, which is probably the strongest skill in the game in the first act of normal. Even though it's a synergy for Valkyrie, it's not the ideal skill distribution you want, so you might want to respec. Depends on how quickly you want to transition out of this build. But the skill layout otherwise is max decoy, max Valkyrie, max strafe. Well, not quite max strafe because I'm only level 71 in this case. And I've instead opted to put more points into penetrate because it's necessary for the decoys to hit things, since their attack rating is very terrible without a lot of points in penetrate. Aside from that, it's obviously one in the prereqs and 1 point in critical strike. You eventually want more points in critical strike, but since critical strike doesn't work for decoys but only Valkyries, I don't make it a priority initially. For the gear, since you're on hardcore, you need resistances, so you can't use a bow right away. You're going to use a spirit sword, just for the +1s in mana, but most importantly for the cast rate, which helps you get your summons out quicker. You're going to want to shop some free passive skill gloves at a vendor, either Anya or with a cow portal and someone like Geet in Nightmare. Free Topaz helm, my preferred choice on day 1 for pretty much any build. In this case I'm using a triple diamond shield because it gives him a bit more risk than just an Ancient's Pledge. Since you have 3 slots locked here, which generally don't really provide any risk aside from the 30 cold risk on here, it's going to be pretty hard to get your risks where they need to be, and that's why I'm using this shield. Boots, anything with risk will do, as long as it's not poison, which is not important. Ring, again, you're going to want anything with risk basically. Second ring, same story. Belt, same story. I'm using a Topaz craft, which I would ideally like to use, but you're most likely just going to use whatever you can find that has some res. As you can see, my res are not where they need to be for doing Travancore runs. So I'm going to make the Prismatic Amulet recipe. Now they're looking quite a bit better. And as mentioned, for this build, I would focus on Travancore, maybe Eldritch and Shank, and maybe some Corrupted Zones if they are decent and not too far away. Early upgrades. If you're going outside Travancore, you definitely want Teleport offhand right away, just to be able to skip over walls and reposition your Valkyries. The earliest choice for this is to make a cow portal at Nightmare or Hellakara and shop a teleport charge staff like this one. But as soon as possible you'd want a Nash staff just for the recharging and the cast rate, which helps the animation be a bit quicker. Some other upgrades, if you decide to stay summons on for a while, is Magic Find gear like Gold or Alibaba main hand, Gold Wrap. But eventually, if you want to go down this route, you would want a Witchwild string here, so you can actually use strafe. The thing, apart from the amplified damage on Witchwild string, is the risk it provides, which is the main reason why you can't really use a bow early on for hardcore play. But this build is absolutely very strong for Travancore day 1, starting out with basically nothing. You just want to try and start summoning as soon as you get into the game because there's a small cooldown on Valkyries. And there's a trick in Travancore. If all the counts is inside, you want to pop into the Durance just to reposition all your minions. What's this? I didn't go over Merc here at all. For hardcore, you're gonna wanna use the BO Merc. And to gear him up initially, I have the mercenary guide, which I've linked in the corner, as well as the description, so you can check out at least the first few minutes of it. But if you're going outside Travancore, you might want to use a Vigor Rogue, depending. You could also use a Harmony Bow offhand just to run quicker, but I much prefer the Act 5 Merc, also because once you gear him up a bit, he has decent damage output, and the Battlecry debuff helps your minions as well. So from here, if you want to stop playing summons as soon as possible, there's a few choices you could do. You could either do Exploding Arrow or Freezing Arrow and just run Chaos, if that's your thing. You could go Plague Javelin. In this case, as you'd want a bit of gear, I would say for Plague you would want some Titans of Decent Crafts, Razor Tail for Pierce, 2-3 Javelin Amulet, and maybe 2-3 Javelin Circlet. And you'd ideally want a Pus Spitter for a Rogue Merc to proc lower res, and potentially like Karen Wind for Poison Creeper to debuff. Like if you have that, you could even do Chaos with Plague Javelin, which is usually not possible because of the Balrogs that are poison immune. But another choice you could switch to very early, which is quite a decent option as well, is going straight into Lightning Strike and farming Arcane. Which I'll show a couple more things about Summons on before I go into this Lightning Strike Arcane build. Is for Chaos runs, I'd say they are quite viable, but I would wait until I have the Nash staff for the decent teleport, which will speed you up a lot. And another thing about Summons on is it's currently the lowest budget Butcherstone build in the game. If you want details on how that works, you should go to the Amazon discussion channel in the BT2 Discord and check the pinned messages. There's a video guide on how it's done. Now as for early Lightning Strike and Arcane, your skill distribution is going to be max Lightning Strike and its 2 synergies, max Evade for a bit of dodge but mainly for move speed. I have 1 point Valkyrie, which I can cast when I run into some nasty packs, and then leftover skills could be dodge. Gear wise, crafted Maiden Javelins, whatever you can get with some plus skills, ideally some attack speed as well. You're going to shop some +3 Javelin gloves at a vendor. In this case I was too lazy to get them. I have this helm. I would want to use 3 Topaz helm, but again I was too lazy to set this character up properly. You're going to have charms to cover your resistances, so you can use a 3 Topaz helm or a Tarn helm. For chest you want to use the new Hustle Runework, mainly for attack speed, but also for a bit of faster run. Amulet resistances, again you could use a Prismatic with the recipe I just showed. In this case I'm having Saracens. Shield you definitely want a Rhyme in a decent block base like a Tower Shield, Bone Shield and Grim Shield. Gives a block, cannot be frozen, magic find and res. Boots you're going to want something with at least 20-30 faster run and some res. And these 3 slots is just going to be more res. And if you have enough res, you would want to use magic find in some of them like a Topaz Craft Belt. For the mercenary I'm going to use an Act 5 Bio Merc. It just makes it safer and a bit easier on the potion management. I use a Harmony Bow on offhand to run between packs. And I'm just going to focus on Flat Path Arcane, which is what I'm going to do on every build. So the trick here is you can pretty quickly identify which one is the correct path. As you can see, this is a path with stairs because there's a gap here. That means the other path with stairs is the opposite direction. So the flat path is going to be one of these 2. The flat path is always across from the path with the portals. This way I can peek my head and see this is not the teleport path, so it's the flat path. I'm going to skip ghouls for the most part, as long as they're not blocking my way completely, because they're not really that good. And I'm just going to do half the path up to the chests and start a new game. That's the most efficient approach to running Arcane early. One transition out of summons into maps with a different build could be Magic Arrow. It's getting nerfed for Season 8, but I think it's still very viable. Let's say you wanted to go for Freezing Arrow endgame, perhaps. This could be a stepping stone towards that. The main thing you need is a Mage Wrath, ideally with more than one socket, but one socket can do initially. You ideally really want more sockets to get your attack speed where it needs to be. Like, you would really want to hit the 63 breakpoint, which you can of course achieve with one Shaolin here for 20, some 220 gloves, or in this case I have 320 gloves, and a gold wrap for 60. Then you only need a single attack speed dual socket in one of these slots to hit the 63 breakpoint, or 10% on your arrows. But of course, ideally you want plus skills on the arrows, since the damage of this build is based on plus skills. I think Valkyrie Wing as a helm is hard to avoid. Apart from the Amazon skills, it gives faster run and mana per kill, which you really need. For chest, plus skills and risk is the main thing you're looking for, in my opinion. Nash does the job, could also be a Viper Magi. Belt, gold wrap as I went over, attack speed, magic find, great stats. Rings, you're going to want one Ravenfrost, I guess, for Canopy Frozen. And the second slot is likely going to be some combination of resistances and something to help with sustain, mana leech, life per kill, mana per kill. Amulet, I'm using Maris in this case, because the build is pretty tight on resistances. Of course, just in this scenario I don't have any res charms. I do have an Amazon torch. You could definitely fill some gaps in terms of resistances by having a full inventory here. If you don't need res on your amulet, you could use perhaps maybe High Lords, +1 and 20 attack speed to try and get the next break point potentially. Or you could use Bloodcraft with light per kill, 2 Amazon skills and something. Boots could be any rares or crafts, res, faster run, magic find, perhaps Silkwave for mana per kill. Offhand, I'd say it depends a bit. In this case I'm using a Defiance Mercenary because he's a bit tankier, so I'd probably want a CTA offhand, but if you don't have a CTA yet, or you're using a Biomerc, you could use something like a Wizard Spike Splendor offhand to help you cast slow movement quicker, because the Amazon cast rate frames are terrible. But this setup with 4 skillers has very decent damage, as you can see. The only thing is it's only shooting 5 arrows, so you don't have the greatest AoE. But for tier 1s, it should do just fine. Skill-wise, no surprise, it's Magic Arrow and the 3 synergies, which is 80 of your points. 1 point Penetrate, 1 point Valkyrie for nasty packs, rest into Evade and move speed. Now a quick showcase of one of my 2 topics for endgame mapping on Amazon, which is going to be freezing/cold arrow. Cold arrow is probably getting nerfed a bit, but I still prefer freezing arrow anyway, with cold arrow as more of a backup, cleanup skill for stragglers. For freezing arrow you're going to max freezing arrow and the 2 synergies obviously. You're going to max evade for move speed. Going to 1 point bulk for tanking nasty stuff, 1 point penetrate. Enough points into pierce to hit 100% with your gear, which depends on what gear you're using. Ideally, you'd have pierce slams on gloves, belt, amulet, arrows, some combination of these to hit 100. Obviously you don't need on all of them. In this case, for the testing character, I didn't make the pierce slam, so I'm just using a razor tail here to hit the 100. The most obvious build choice would be Snow Clash or Dungos, probably depending on your setup and what you want to do. For the remaining gear, Ice Runeward I think it's hard to beat. In this case I have it in a composite bow because the test stash doesn't have a stack bow. But obviously you want a +3 bow skill stack bow here. The reason I think why Ice is pretty hard to beat is, apart from the damage boost obviously and the Holy Freeze slow, it also grants a massive gold fine, which I think is very big now that we have the Geet event, and also for sustaining your map orbs. Gloves is going to be 320 gloves, 330 gloves. These are crazy, of course, you're probably not gonna get these, but I'd most likely use 220 gloves with res and or magic find. You could try to craft using the caster craft recipe, because this gets mana per kill on each roll, so if you roll 2 20s with mana per kill, that could be really good potentially. For boots, you're most likely going to use mana per kill again, Silkweave. You could use rare wrist boots with faster run and a free MPK slam if you're lucky. Arrows, you're looking for anything with bow skills, attack speed, pierce, res. Ideally with a minus cold wrist slam like this pair. This is fire res, but you'd want cold res obviously. Ring number 1, this is an ancient test stash, so you cannot be frozen ring anymore, but you'd want a skill ring with typically life per kill, mana per kill slam, maybe magic find slam. Second slot, same story, mana per kill, life per kill, magic find slam, skill ring. Because I'm playing hardcore, I want to use shaft stop. Ideally it's a 3 socket shaft stop, could also be a +1 with 2 sockets like this, or maybe cannot be frozen 2 sockets. For helm, Nightwings is the obvious choice, but you could even use a Shaco if you can get a decent one with 2 sockets. The damage difference is not as big as you thought it might be. Obviously this is just the 2 socket Nightwings. I think the trade-off could be worthwhile, because Shaco gives you a nice magic find boost, which you're really lacking on, and of course it gives some defensive stats with the life and PDR. For the amulet, there's a few choices. In this case I'm using Mara's, because with shaft stop in this setup my wrists are pretty tight. You could use a crafted blood amulet with life per kill, 2 Amazon and wrists if you can get one. Another choice could be Crescent Moon. In this case I wouldn't use Crescent Moon because I really need the resistances, but it could be viable potentially. If you decide to go with a different setup with Chains of Honor maybe, but in case of going Chains of Honor you're lacking DR, in which case you'd probably have to use Dungos as a belt if you ask me. Offhand CTA obviously, full skillers, Great Annie, Torch, Riss, small jumps most likely, maybe Magic Find if you can fit it in. For the Mercenary I'm using a Faith Rogue here. Now for hardcore I would definitely go with the Act 2 Merc with Infinity, just because this build doesn't really have an answer for tanky bosses and Dark Wanderer events that spawn like Act bosses. Like you need the Act 2 Relay Merc for that really. Which obviously means you need quite a bit more attack speed on your gear, which you'll have to solve with dual sockets and slams. But let me show you a map without Infinity just to show you the damage potential, even without an Infinity aura. finally, my other choice for endgame mapping on Amazon is going to be Lightning Strike. It's been nerfed, but it's still a very powerful endgame build, and it's a very straightforward playstyle. You could play this at a slightly lower budget with something like a Kira's, fewer sockets, maybe a Skulders for Magic Find, but this is the endgame showcase. In this case I didn't quite make the slams I wanted. I'm only on 50 attack speed. You really want the 95 breakpoint, which basically means you need an attack speed corrupted Thunderstroke. For the rest of the gear, 220 gloves, 320 gloves. I like 220s with res usually. Ravenfrost in this case, because I don't have a CBF slam and it's not worth losing a facet to use a skill ring. The slam is bad, you'd obviously want life per kill, mana per kill, or magic find. Well, I'm using dongos here, which you might not need, since I'm also using a shaft stop. You could use Thunder Guards for +2 lightning skills. Depends on how tanky your build is and what maps you like to run. Second ring is BK with life per kill slam, which you need for sustain. Boots of Waterwalk, stats, faster block. Storm Shield with runes for res. Shaft Stop is mentioned. In this case I have 1 attack speed dual and 1 facet to hit my breakpoint. 2 Circle Griffins with a couple of facets here. Maras with MBK Slam for sustain and res. Charms are going to be mainly res and skills obviously. Skill setup is Lightning Strike and the 2 synergies, max of 8 for move speed. 1 point penetrate, 1 point Valkyrie, remaining points into dodge. Classic Infinity Mag with the Delirium for crowd control. And this build can absolutely plow tier 1s, tier 2s, and potentially even do tier 3s on hardcore.